good people of Los Angeles. Welcome back to another episode of the Season Pass podcast. We are 4 humans today here, live from our various abodes. We've got Ryan Wallerson and Josh Gross. Ryan's down in Florida. Josh is here in Los Angeles. And Vince La Rosa, our boy, our special guest, is down in Long Beach. I'm coming to you guys from Expo Park as per usual. Man, MLS is back, and they are still doing this tournament, surprisingly enough. I think there for a while I was wondering whether or not it would all really transpire. And, you know, we've all had the chance now to see a few games, LAFC, the Galaxy, among the later games we've recently seen. We're recording this on Wednesday, July 15th. And, yeah, Vince has been a good friend of the podcast, FCFC, our sister pod, and we're so happy to have him here because the 4 of us, I mean, the amount of training days we've had all just talking back and forth between each other, trying to guess what this team's been doing since the early days at UCLA training through the first 2 seasons and to now. But man, like once I knew that Vince was doing these IG stories with the title Little Victories, and that's how you soccer, and the campaign was born to hire Vince because he's, you know, was recently part of some layoffs over at LAFC. I just knew I wanted to get him in our room here because, I mean, Vince, like your insights, you know, you're a friend of mine, you're a brother of mine, but like your insights into tactics and into what goes on behind the scenes, what happens on these plays that, you know, 3 or 4 passes before something happens, you've been able to glean, you know, naturally with your love of the game and your knowledge, but all the conversations and all the time you've spent with Bob and with the team. And, you know, whether you're talking about this team or all the other games, I've just been blown away by your insights. And if you guys haven't, just follow Vince's Instagram because he does stories not every night of the tournament, but he does stories about all the games that I've watched, ironically enough. And so That's How You Soccer, Little Victories, hire Vince is the campaign. That's the hashtag. We're so happy to have you. I'll finally stop talking and let Vince say something.
Oh, I was going to say, thanks, Dweezy. I can just leave now, right? Because that's all we need to know. Yeah, just a great plug. I mean, it's going to be all downhill from here. Yeah, man, I've been blown away by the love and appreciation that some people have had for kind of what I put together just to stay busy, to stay sharp, to be honest with you. And then when I was initially kind of let go, I was surprised how many people had nice words to say. So I wanted to maybe reward them and strike while the iron's hot, hopefully, and put some content out there. And so it's been super cool. It's been weird to do it just alone. And I hope it's getting better, but man, it's been kind of awesome to see people jump on there and have some questions. Cause look, I'm going to have these conversations one way or another. I just hope that people will be there to talk back to me. So I'm not talking to the wall.
Right. And I mean, I can just say for all 4 of us, I think we all feel the most comfortable within the paragraphs and the sentences of our writing trade. That's what we are by trade as reporters and as writers. All of us by nature of our jobs also do podcasts and radio and now Instagram live shows. And, you know, I think it's something that adds, especially during quarantine times, another element of, you know, palpability. With like, you know, we can all go on and read these like sort of standard issue reports that like could be computer generated by now. But like seeing you talk about it on IG Live, it really does remind me of just conversations we've had and insight I've just been able to soak off of you so many times at the training center when I had a question about a new player coming in or when I had a question about why Bob was doing something and we could kind of knock back and forth ideas. So I hope a little bit that's what we'll be able to do today. But before I go any further, I should also say we've got a man on the scene down there. All right, we're not only doing this remotely. Ryan Wallerson has been at the MLS Is Back Tournament. Ryan, how the hell has it been out there?
It is strange, man. That's the first word that comes to mind. Just because like I'm staying less than 20 minutes away from the Disney complex, but the ESPN wide world of sports is but one jumble of lanes in what is an entire basically Disney city around here. And even the local Uber drivers really don't have it all down packed. So I guess lesson 1 was leave an hour earlier than I need to for the 20-minute trip, because the first day that I got in, Monday, I wasn't there late. I didn't miss kickoff, but reporters were supposed to be there an hour ahead of time to be brought from the entrance further into the facility, past the security and the temperature check and all of that. And I had to bring the MLS PR guy back outside for me, because I was that reporter just running with my computer charger hanging out of my bag, like, wait, don't close the door. I came all this way. I gotta get in. But I was at LAFC and the Galaxy's first matches, a Group F doubleheader, and the actual press box situation is interesting in itself, because it's it's behind a goal off to the right, the field 17, the field that I watched both matches on Monday. And I actually caught every time they would show the sideline pan of Bob with everything in the background to the right side, I would see myself in the background when I'm watching the highlights. And, that's different. The spaces inside of the box themselves, it's 8 people maximum for social distancing reasons. So, the list, it's a very short list in terms of who's getting in. You can't just go to any game that you want. You have to, if you're big time enough, I suppose you can, but I think the idea is, media pertinent to that market, kind of keep it to that so that everybody that needs to be there can get in. But so I'd requested a couple of other matches outside of the LA games. Their statuses are pending, but the only games that I know I'm good for, because you have to do it game by game, are the LA Galaxy and the LAFC games in the group stage, and then there's another process for the knockout. But man, it's a really interesting experience. Obviously safety is paramount down here, so that's kind of on the forefront of everybody's minds. Right behind safety for me personally, and I think in general, the Black Lives Matter movement is still very strong and pertinent within this tournament, and multiple games have started with gestures of some kind, ranging from just 30 seconds on the knee before the first whistle to Thierry Henry kneeling for all 8 minutes and 46 seconds representatively in that first match for the Impact. But then third comes the soccer, right? And it's been interesting. It's been, I think a little rusty. I've seen a lot of spaces. I've seen a lot of inefficient offenses. I think LAFC and the Houston Dynamo have played the game of the tournament to this point. But I do expect the quality to improve as, it's kind of been like a super accelerated spring training where you need those results to come very quickly in order to secure yourself a knockout stage spot. And I think you're seeing there's a weird semblance of parity, because a lot of the best teams are equally having that trouble to gain traction. So you see teams like NYCFC with 0 points after 2 games, and there are some surprises out there. The hosts of the tournament, one of the biggest of them, Orlando, riding high, and I think already qualified for the knockout round with their 2 victories, and both convincing fashion. It's really interesting. So taking in the optics of everything, in the midst of this social uprising, in the midst of this pandemic, we are playing soccer. I was really, really happy to be on a live field watching live players play this game that we all love for the first time in 4 months after such a fast, crazy start to 2020. Mexico, the home opener, the barn burner against Philadelphia. We were right there and primed for another wild season of LAFC action, but not to be in the midst of this pandemic. But I must say it is good to be back, even amidst all of the haphazardous and controversial circumstances that may be taking place in.
Well, I think all of us are vicariously living through you, Ryan. The press box rats would have enjoyed, spending some time out there and just seeing the spectacle of it all. Like you said, there's so much going on. I feel like this is just a once in a lifetime, like asterisk-y experience. But I'm so happy that you're there. I'm so happy that you're being safe. It was cool to hear that you got to sit near all of our friend Kevin Baxter. So we know there's some familiar faces out there covering the tournament. Which sort of, again, makes it seem a little bit more real. But what was also real was that there was a game, and LAFC played in it, and it was 3-3 in the end. I know that I watched it. Josh, I believe, watched it, and I know Vince watched it because I popped on the IG live afterwards and listened to what he had to say. But Josh, what did you think after that first one? And then, Vince, you can just hop in whenever you're ready.
Well, LAFC was fortunate to walk away with a point. I didn't take it as so much as a tale of two halves, as really LAFC's depth is a weapon. You could see them coming off the bench. That last half an hour was kind of a different match with Houston starting the scuffle and feel the heat and feel the hour that they played. And I don't think any team came in with their legs underneath them, really. Didn't look like it from the games I've seen. So the amount of weapons that the LAFC could pull off the bench, they lose Diamande after a couple minutes, but it really didn't hamper them. You thought, oh, wow, that's a killer. And then it didn't turn out to be that way. Nice for Brian Rodriguez to get that first goal. Great banger by Diego Rossi. I think you see the weapons. Again, I think we'll have a conversation about defense, whether, the defensive issue. My dog wants to say hi. Whether the defensive issues are going to plague LAFC during this tournament or throughout the season or whatever it is, but they're giving up goals in a way that they didn't last year. They can get them, though. And so that's the thing that stood out to me. But really the weapon of the depth, that stood out to me is something that was critical to LAFC's comeback. And that last half an hour, I think you started to see them smile and enjoy the game, enjoy the match. They found the rhythm. To me, that really came through.
Your dog's trying to hop in there because you brought up the defense, and he's like, no, Bob's going to get crazy if you bring up the defense, Josh. I agree with most of what you have to say. I think yes. My one point and the thing that I brought up a lot on the IG Live was I don't actually believe that the defense is so much a problem. And when I say that, I mean it's not a systemic thing. It didn't occur. And I know a lot of people want to argue with me and say LAFC is too high up the pitch. They leave these spaces. They do these things. At some point, you're going to have to come to terms with this is the way LAFC plays, and they're willing to do those things to create the advantages that they want to create. Now, the goals that they gave up, if I'm being honest, just individual errors, man. I mean, just straight up, brain farts. To be honest with you, Latif, I kind of pointed it out on Twitter before I hopped on. Latif had 2 errors on one play, and it led to a goal. Tristan turns off for a second, and then LAFC, I will say this, has always had a little bit of a difficulty defending lateral set pieces, not corners, but just lateral set pieces, which is why it's so important not to give up those types of fouls. And they fell asleep again. And what I saw and what I tried to intimate to people was it's the first game in preseason. Like that's going to happen. And then on the flip side, and I think Bob even referenced this, how many times are you going to expect if you're LAFC, if you're playing against LAFC, that each time an error happens that you're going to finish and you're going to score a goal? Because it seemed like every time LAFC made an error that Houston actually was able to capitalize. And I think Houston can be happy about that because they finished and they punished them. But if I'm a team watching and I'm trying to just gauge that whole 90 minutes, I'd be a little worried because LAFC looked really good and they're going to get sharper. And so when they get sharper, and if you can't get a little bit of luck, you're going to be pounded by that because that wave after wave of pressure. Because I was pleasantly surprised to see the way LAFC counter pressed. I thought, and Bob even said they're going to have to find moments to do that, but they seemed relentless. And like you said, Josh, they used the depth really well. He made substitutions at perfect times. Obviously, Dio is one he probably didn't want to have to make, but Danny Musovski came in and actually did some things that were interesting. But the rest of the substitutions really just buoyed that team, and Houston had to have been. It's so funny. We heard about Houston being the one team that's going to be used to the heat, and they look the one that wilted the most in that match.
I think you hit several nails on the head there, Vince. First of all, talking about the way that this is how LAFC plays. So any detractors that want to try to get at them for playing too high up, I mean, either you're new to the team or you're just never going to be okay with some of the situations that they put themselves in, striving for, that identity that they play with consistently. And, Bob says it after the match. If you want to play like that, then you have to be able to defend up high and you have to be able to drop back. Individual moments of failure on LAFC's part led to, Houston's 3 goals. But I definitely think that they were also individual moments of success for the Houston players. Rodriguez for Houston, those first 2 goals, he gets Latif to leave his feet, but he's still dribbling after he gets past 7. He avoids a slide. He avoids a slide from another defender who whose identity escapes me at the moment. But then he also got past Djokovic and was able to beat Vermeer. So that's a moment that you have to, tip your hat. Once he gets past Latif, who has made that vital error in leaving his feet on defense, there still was a lot to do for Memo Rodriguez to score that first goal. And then the second one, as you say, Tristan Blackman, just a moment's hesitation allows Rodriguez to slip in ahead of him. And once he does, again, Vermeer makes that great save. And if the ball bounces anywhere else, then that's an instance where a mistake doesn't hurt LAFC, but the unlucky bounce went right back to Rodriguez's feet, and he was allowed to walk it in, basically. So, I won't put that on team defense so much as I will individual moments. As you say, Vince, early spring training game, those types of things are going to happen. I do think it's really, really impressive that as many issues as LAFC had in the opening stages of the game, I think that Houston played a really, really smart game. I said it in my article afterwards. They kind of took Bob Bradley's words about picking the right moments to strike to heart, and were able to score 3 goals with less than 30% of possession in the first half. And those possession numbers didn't really change in the second, where LAFC was able to gain some traction and close the gap. But what they were really, really efficient on the counter presses. I think that at least gave Palacio problems on the right side and was able to get in on him often. Memo Rodriguez was running all over the center, but they were able to corral it and give that opportunity for the from the 60th to the 70th minute. The opportunities were coming and they finished them. Shout out to Brian Rodriguez for getting his first goal for LAFC, but Bradley Wright Phillips as well for getting his first to open the scoring. That was a poacher's goal. They thought that there might have been an offside issue, but they're, agree or not, turned out not to be. And I think that was a really emphatic debut for a player that, given Vela's absence and Diamante's apparent injury, is going to become really important for how LAFC do in this tournament. That was a really good first impression, I thought. Afterwards, he said he could have gone longer as well. So, that's something that I think, if he can prove that in practice to Bob, should be exciting to see out here. If not a full 90, much closer to it from Bradley Wright Phillips.
And I wanted to jump on something Vince said about preseason mode, which is I would say exactly what a lot of the errant passes felt like, what a lot of the hesitations felt like during stretches of the match on LAFC's side, particularly in the first half. And while, there was that influx of players and that influx of spirit in the second half, I wanted to see what all three of you guys sort of felt like you saw. I mean, I remember Vince mentioning in the IG story where Diego kind of rushed back. I don't know how many yards he had to run, but he had to rush back to make a play or to, I forget exactly what happened with his play, but I remember almost an equal moment where Brian Rodriguez did the same thing. Like, these players were hustling back. They were still committed despite things sort of not always linking together in the way that we're used to LAFC seeing. So, and maybe we can just start with Ryan. Did you see things from your vantage point there, that seemed that this team, again, despite Vela, despite the pandemic, despite the long delay between their last game, despite the heat, despite the new captain in Marc-Anthony Kaye and all these things, did you see a waver at all in the commitment we're used to seeing out of Bob Bradley's team since he's been in control of LAFC?
A wavering commitment? I wouldn't say so. I think that they absorbed Houston's best punch. They went in at halftime, literally giving up a goal in the dying moments of the first half to establish a 2-goal deficit, a 2-goal lead for Houston, and said, we stick to how we play. We play how we've been playing. We just are sharper in the individual moments, and we'll win the second half and be able to do whatever we do in the game. LAFC had enough missed opportunities in the midst of this match, first and second half, to have had more than four goals. Bradley Wright Phillips got in and put a couple of really good attempts on the Houston keeper that he was able to save. But I think that every legitimate Houston attack turned into a goal. So I think LAFC continuing to play how it does, even if it takes it time to gain traction, you don't want to see the team continually put itself in holes. But once that traction gets going, once the team is on, they're able to close deficits, multi-goal deficits. And again, I think that they could have taken the lead and gotten all 3 points if they were just a little bit sharper, or if they'd found that spark a little bit sooner. But a wavering of commitment, I think would be a huge shock to see, and it's not something that I've seen thus far from the team.
And Vince, you saw a similar type of commitment and cohesion from your end, right? I mean, you're missing all these things, and yet it didn't seem like the players themselves ever lacked belief about getting back into the game.
No, and I think that stems from, honestly, from opening whistle to the final whistle. LAFC's counter press was sweltering. I mean, they were swarming Houston. I think I put up after the match or maybe the next day, just Edward Atuesta's chalkboard, and one of the things that they show on the chalkboard is recoveries. The amount of recoveries that he had all around the pitch, but also really high up the pitch, was amazing. I mean, it was incredible the amount of times, and that's just him. And that's also a product. You look at Edward and you say, wow, he's amazing, but you only have recoveries if you're working as a team. So that what it doesn't show is the fact that, maybe Latif gets a touch here and that allows Edward to do something, or Cheeky puts pressure on a guy and that's how you get the recovery. So that commitment was just, it was amazing. And it's probably what got me a little pumped for the game, just to see them every time they lost the ball be so quick and so proactive and getting it back despite the heat, despite the preseason. And then in terms of what we kind of come to know and love with LAFC is you could literally see the rust just kind of wearing off as that half went. The first half was definitely tough. And they settled for some things that I think they would say are kind of un-LAFC-esque. And maybe that is a little bit of tired legs, and maybe that's a little bit of just trying to figure it out along the way. But that second half, we started to see the connections and the movements that we really are used to. I mean, both goals come from wide forwards, starting out wide, getting into central areas behind their fullback, and passes into just penetrating areas. So I think in that regard, there's no wavering, and there's a total commitment to that. And so I see Bob after the game, and I see him I know he's upset because he probably thinks they could have taken all 3 points. He's upset because individual errors kind of distracted from what is otherwise a good performance. But he has to be happy, thinking, if this is our starting point, man, where can we go from here? Where can we go in the next game when we feel our legs a little bit more?
And I think he said as much when he said that, given how long it's been since we've played, there's, as you say, things that they want to improve on. But he said that he saw a lot of good things. The coaching staff can take a lot of good things from the match. And, I emphatically agree with that because, as you say, Vince, the midfield buildup had those moments where you recognize, the efficiency, the decision-making, and the execution that leads the forwards into those positions where they're able to score these amazing goals. I mean, individual brilliance from Diego Rossi to score, that quickly from that angle and hit the top left corner of the goal post. But Brian Rodriguez is, after starting that set piece, the way that the ball kind of returned to him, Francisco Janela, Edward Atuesta to Brian Rodriguez, through the Houston defense, a half second of delay or of indecision, and that play is broken up before the ball gets to Rodriguez's feet. So that speed of decision making and the ability to take it out of your brain and put it to your feet, that's par for the course for LAFC. And I think it's understandable. These aren't machines. That process takes a little bit of time to get into, whatever you want to, however close it will get to mid-season form in this tournament. I honestly question if any team will look like they would have looked at this time of year without the COVID-19 pandemic freezing the season. But whoever can muster up the most of their regular game plan is going to do well in the tournament. And I think that at their best, LAFC still have the most dangerous offense in the league. So it's up to everybody else's defenses to game plan how to curtail that effort, starting with the Galaxy on Saturday.
Yeah, Josh, we've seen now. We started with Laurent Simon. We had Benny Feilhaber. We've had, obviously, Carlos Vela as a captain. We've had veteran leadership with Beta Jour, with Jordan Harvey, with the likes of Lee Win. I mean, this is a team that's seen traditional leaders, veteran leaders. In this game, none of the names that I mentioned played. They didn't feature. Jordan was the only one that was even available, and we had Marc-Anthony Kaye as the captain, and yet they were able to maintain a sort of sense of LAFC's normal style and the way that they played. I mean, what does it say about a team that can manage to do something like that within its first couple of years of existence? Like, how well do you think Bob has these guys bought into the system for things to come off that way, where even if things were lacking sharpness, methodologically, it was all running on the formula system that we know.
Yeah, not a surprise. I mean, it's basically the same core group. We've seen some pieces interchange where you referenced that, but there's a lot of consistency within the group from year 1 to year 3. And I feel that. And I think you can see that whether they have their legs and whether they're sharp in the way that they need to be sharp. I think the way that they play, it requires a sharpness. I mean, that's been such a focal point of what Bob Bradley has described as sort of a necessity of the way that they play, and the ability to make quick decisions and turn over the ball and get the ball back and counter press and immediately go into an offensive attack. You know, that doesn't just happen. You have to be sharp at it. And so I think as they get their legs under them, a lot of things that Ryan and Vince spoke about, we'll see more of that cohesiveness. But certainly they are dedicated to their system. They're dedicated to the way that they play and see the game and want to execute. And they continue to do it. And not only that, they have the talent. I said last week, you know, will we see these sort of moments where they lack quality because Carlos Vela is not on the pitch? And it felt like the first hour that some of that quality was missing. But then it's like, how much of that is lack of quality and how much of that is just lack of sharpness? And I think you owe it more towards the lack of sharpness. And you know, I don't think that that's going to hamstring them. I think the goals will come. I don't think they'll have a problem with that. It's whether they can avoid the mistakes. I thought Tristan Blackman wasn't great. I think Latif wasn't at his best. He made, as Vince said, 2 mistakes on one play. You know, he hustles so much and he gets the ball back and he makes up for it. But I do feel like, you know, this was LAFC at 75%. I'm just sort of throwing a percentage out there because it wasn't close to 100%. And I don't know if you could call him 100% without Carlos, but as best as they can be without someone of that ability on the pitch, you know, I'm expecting to see a more cohesive, more determined unit against the Galaxy, really. And I don't think that we'll see anything that gets them out of their style or out of their rhythm. You know, even against Portland, which is like, you know what they're going to do. Even in Houston, you know what they're going to do. They're going to hit the counter and they're going to sit back and wait for their moment. And so if LAFC isn't sharp and gives up those moments, those opportunities, you know, they can be hit, and we've seen that. But you know, I think they know that they can rely on sort of the goals coming. And when you have that in the back of your head, where you know that the goals can come, that relieves a lot of the pressure, it feels like. So they can play their style and get away with it even when they're not at their best.
I promised Vince I wouldn't keep him too long, and so I would be remiss if I didn't ask him about that forthcoming Galaxy game. Ryan, you, Josh, and I can dive into it shortly. But Vince, Galaxy played as well right after LAFC. They lost 2-1. Chicharito missed the penalty. I wasn't able to watch the full game, but yeah, this is the matchup. This is the rivalry matchup, the LA Derby, coming live from Orlando, coming up on Saturday. And what do you expect in this game? What did you see at the Galaxy game to give you any hints about how it might unfold?
I think as with any matchup between the Galaxy and LAFC, it's so cliche, but it's so true. It's expect the unexpected. What I saw in that Galaxy team is a team that doesn't quite know what it can do yet, doesn't quite know its ideas. I was actually surprised to see them actually change formation as well. Guillermo Barros Scalotto is usually just a very straight 4-3-3 guy. They kind of move some pieces around, and I found that kind of interesting. But I think if I really want to say what I think I know I'm going to see, it's probably going to be a Galaxy team that's going to surprise you and all of a sudden show up on the day that they're supposed to be there because they get up for these games. And they're going to give LAFC a game, and there's no chance that LAFC is going to watch what the Galaxy have done either pre-pandemic or at this tournament and take them lightly, because they just know in the history of this matchup that's not the way that it's going to go down.
Absolutely. Well, Vince, I'm going to ask these guys more about their thoughts on the Galaxy game here in a second, but I wanted to let you head off and go back to your normal life. I just wanted to say thank you again. The Instagram, That's How You Soccer, Little Victories is the show that I watch religiously. And yeah, we hope so much that not only do we keep hearing your insights, I want to see your writing again. You're always welcome here and at FCFC. thank you so much for everything you've done. You've always been there. It's a bummer to not have those takeaways. We all know as fellow writers that writers are often ignored at times where we need them the most. So we're not ignoring you. Hashtags hire Vince. Can't wait to read more of your stuff, hear more of your things. And this guy's a killer analyst, guys. Most of the things I know about this league and this team are basically just like gleaned from Vince. So I'm kind of lost without him.
Well, I 100% appreciate what you guys do, and I appreciate you having me on. And the hashtag and just kind of the way you guys have been soldiering on and trying to get me some exposure. I think I will be forever grateful. And man, I miss you guys. You guys are my boys. We used to hang out. We joke about what we're gonna get from press conferences, what we're gonna get from this guy. Hey, what do you think this guy's gonna say? And those moments for us, as you say, we sometimes get the short end of the stick, and those are the special moments that we hold on to and what keeps us going. So not having those has been the toughest part. But I appreciate you guys, and I'm still here. I'll still be listening, and I'll be putting out my stuff as much as I can. And I am a resource to you guys and to anyone else that wants to talk football. Because like I said, if I don't do it with you guys, I'm going to be talking to the wall or my dog or Cody, and she's going to lose her mind. And I don't want to, we're still trying to lock it down, stay locked down here. So I don't want her to lose her mind when we can't really get out of the house. Yeah. Oh, and wear a mask, everyone. Come on.
Wear a mask. Wear masks. Shout out to Cody. Shout out to the dogs everywhere. And Vince, we'll get you back on, man. Much love to you. That's How You Soccer on Instagram. Thanks for being on, buddy.
Thank you, Vince.
We're still here, Season Pass Podcast. Josh Gross, Ryan Wallerson. My name is Alex Dwyer, and we are talking about the COVID Cup. We are talking about the MLS is back, besides two teams which are not here or there. And Ryan Wallerson, you're there. We wanted to kind of rifle through some stuff while we had time with Vince. But Ryan, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about, what have kind of the discussions been on the ground? Like, are you seeing or hearing things differently than we are? Like, are the reporters excited about this tournament? Are the players, as you see them warming up and stuff, are they jovial? Is this something that people are digging, or is this something that's sort of like awkward and fumbly, like the way I sometimes see it on TV?
There is a certain semblance of awkward fumbleness to it. But, that's to be expected. Everything was kind of thrown together from the accreditation to the credentialing. You can't get into it without the credential because it's part of the security clearance. I think that this is a lot of people working on the fly at multiple levels and just trying to put the product on the field as long as the powers that be say they were allowed to do so. So from the PR people to the security people to the journalists to the players to the coaches, I think I ran into Diego from LAFC PR, and he's rocking his quarantine curls, and we're just talking about how boring it is with everybody adhering to those social practices and staying in their rooms. There are rec rooms that are available to the players that have so far gone mostly unused by all accounts, by anecdotal accounts that I've had in conversations with people. And, it's just the team's thankful and proud of the fact that it hasn't had any positive results thus far, and they want to keep it that way. But to do that, it's a lot of television and hotel food.
Yeah.
That's, that on the real world level for the people that are here, especially the people that are in the bubble, which I am not. I'm a few miles down the road in Kissimmee. But I think that's the most important part of this tournament outside of the on the field aspect. Just remembering that even here, and especially here, the stakes are very high for people to stay healthy, because you don't want to go the way of FC Dallas or Vancouver. And, that's just a simple fact of life.
Josh, what do you think, about this mental aspect of it? I mean, just in competing in general, I think about myself in my very amateur career as a club soccer player in college and just, playing it. It's you sort of need to have your shit together to compete. And these guys are again, they're isolated, they're bored, they're like playing video games probably constantly, then they're going out to training sessions. Like, what do you think, just, you know, you've reported on sports for years, like, about how athletes can stay like mentally ready during this, like, and whether or not you've felt in the games that you've seen like a significant difference between, say, a preseason mode and like this is not just preseason mode, this is like weird season mode.
It is weird season mode for sure. I think the competitive juices flow, and it doesn't take a lot to do that. Can they compete at their best? Can they feel like I'm going to step on the field and give 100%, knowing that my body's not going to break down, knowing that I can give everything? Probably not, because they're not fit the way they want to be. But, I think it goes back to something I had a thought of last week, and we were talking about Carlos Vela and the decision not to go, and you can't hold it against him. He's a grown man with responsibilities that are more important than competitive sports. But I brought up the point that, and this could be totally unfair, but I'm going to say it anyways, like, Michael Jordan would not have missed a tournament like this. And so there's levels of competitiveness, and there's reasons why people like Carlos Vela, who have sort of reputations of, well, competing is maybe not the highest priority. Of course, we know he skipped out on a World Cup, and he can have whatever reasons he wants for that. But, like, I think if you're a fan of these clubs, you have to give these athletes a lot of leeway considering the circumstances. But you want them to show up, and you want them to represent, and you want them to win, and you want to know that the players in the locker room have every intention of doing whatever it takes legally to win. And I think we've seen some competitive matches that the matches I've seen have sort of run the gamut from pretty darn good, and that's the LAFC Houston match, to pretty bad. Like, there's been some terrible matches, a lot of 0-0 draws, and even that, like, doesn't describe the sort of depth of the just disillusion you get watching these contests. So it's real hit and miss. But at the end of the day, I think once you get through the group stage, once we get to the knockout round, I'm expecting the competitiveness to ramp up. And so what? These are high-paid athletes. They're professional athletes. They get to play sports for a living, show up and compete. And I think we're seeing that for the most part. I haven't seen every single match. But, there are players going at it. There are hard fouls. I haven't seen – I'm very curious about, obviously, this Galaxy match with LAFC coming up. How intense is it? Can it match the intensity that we see of games that are in stadiums, either down in Carson or the Bank of California Stadium? It's hard to imagine they will. But at the same point, I've also really enjoyed listening sort of the inside baseball, as it were, is the term. You hear the setup for set pieces, and you hear sort of the positioning in a way that we haven't heard before. And I think that's pretty neat. The conversation with the officials, pretty neat. Some of the coaching discussions, all these, we think we get it because all this stuff in terms of the production, they're mic'd up 100 different ways, but it feels like we're getting a little bit more inside than we have. And perhaps that's another window to the competitiveness. And I don't think it's going to lack for competitiveness this tournament. I don't think it has so far. I think the players are going to deal with the boredom and deal, if not, if someone does something stupid and they can't handle it and they go out and they test positive, they'll never hear the end of it, right? So you're here to do a job. It seems like LAFC is locked in. Bob Bradley has them focused on what the mission is. And the fact that none of them have tested positive, I think, is something you have to really sort of take into how seriously they're taking all of this. And that means something here. So I'm expecting a highly competitive match when we look back on the Galaxy contest that's coming up. And I think as this tournament plays out, that's certainly going to be the theme, is that the competitiveness will match what people's expectations are for these kinds of athletes, this kind of event.
Ryan, what do you think, on that side of it? I mean, is it disorienting? LA County cases are like rising, right? California had its record day, I believe, today, Wednesday. Florida's broke the national record. And then, we get to watch soccer, and it's like sort of this like disorienting thing where like both we're living and then where this tournament's taking place. For me, it's like it was really disorienting to hear the piped in crowd noise on the live feed was something that you didn't have to feel, you didn't have to experience. But sounds like Josh was able to watch at least sometimes those feeds that don't have the crowd noise, and it's sort of like reminded me of like the preseason games, hearing some of the shouting. But when you were there and being able to hear things without a crowd, was that kind of a cool element to it, where you could also see some of that, just the competitiveness and sort of letting this very stressful time melt away in the minds of the players at least, and they can focus on, doing their job, which is competing?
I think on two levels, it's an interesting experience. Both, first, just the in-game level of hearing a lot more than I'm used to because of the lack of the crowd. It does sound like a pickup soccer match. So you're able to figure out, who's the most vocal player on the field, whose voice is that, and you kind of figure out who the field general is and how efficiently they're able to, implement their ideas into their teammates quickly and at speed. And I think there was a lot of that on Monday. I heard a lot of Peter Vermeer when he was on my side of the field. I heard a lot of Mark Anthony Kaye. And I think that those are elements that get lost, that don't even get lost, that can never be found in the midst of, 22,000 people at the bank for a LA Derby. But it is it's kind of like a peek behind the curtain in the mind of the player and the dynamic of the team to understand, who's the point guard out there, because obviously 10 on 10, a captain's a captain, a number 10's a number 10, but there are those voices of influence that definitely, I think, aren't always apparent in the score sheet or in the stat sheet or in the gaming articles the next day. So that element has been really cool to kind of explore. And, obviously I've only been to the one game, but I think I'll be hearing a lot and be able to recognize a lot of voices in the LA versus LA game on Saturday. But then on the level of just the players being able to escape everything that's going on, to just go out and do what they do and do what they love, that's got to be freeing. That's got to be cathartic, that almost therapeutic after all of this time, being stuck indoors without football. And now you're still stuck indoors, but you've been given football. Football has been given back to you. As a player, as an athlete, you've got to be happy to be. They were so happy to be getting back to doing what you love to do. They were happy to get training back, as limited as it was for safety precautions. Every step, every crumb of the full spoon that is a normal circumstance season being given back to them slowly. And I don't think they'll get the entire spoon. I don't think anybody will. Certainly not in the midst of this tournament where all of these safety protocols are in place. But I think each little piece of the normal picture is way more valuable than the sum of its parts right now, just because of how the players have been deprived of it for so long. And I don't know how that manifests. I don't know if that keys a player in more. I don't know if that can be a distraction, thinking about the outside world in the midst of a game. I wonder about the ability to completely shut it off, but I definitely think that having football back is better than not having football back, at least when speaking from and trying to get into the mind of the athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we saw, both of these teams play on, I guess it was Monday night, and the Galaxy dropped points, LAFC dropped points. Both of them need to win this game. But the Galaxy, Ryan, you were there for the whole match. What was your sense from how that team is coming along in this tournament? And Vince gave his sort of insights on what he expects in the game, but what do you expect from your standpoint?
Well, I think Vince is absolutely right. You always expect the unexpected when it comes to these LA versus LA clashes, but obviously a lot of that unpredictability was driven by one Zlatan Ibrahimovic over the first two seasons. This will be the first time that they play that he is not a factor. So we'll see how much Chicharito is able to kind of shake up that regular dynamic, or if one can be established for the first time. But obviously he'll personally get a little bit of confidence from, opening his LA Galaxy scoring account and getting that monkey off of his back proverbially. But, the Galaxy right now look like, as Vince said, they look like a team that doesn't know what it's fully capable of. They, on paper, seem like they should be a lot more dangerous than the team that I saw play against Portland. And part of that is because Portland just comes in and mollywops people. Like they throw you off your offensive game. They make you fight for everything. That's their style. So, Portland being on top and everybody else kind of having to fight through them for whatever prospects they have in this tournament almost seems appropriate, because they are the type of team that that takes it to you, regardless of your style of play. LAFC know that well. But I taking Portland out of it, I also saw, just a team that didn't have this. Watching LAFC and then watching the Galaxy, I saw a different level of chemistry, a different level of cohesion, a different level of collective understanding of football ideas. And that's to be expected because, as Josh said, the nucleus for LAFC, while they've changed pieces here and there, some of those pieces quite integral, has remained fairly well formed throughout its short history, where, the Galaxy have just imported a bunch of new players to try to improve weak spots from last season. They've had to replace a talisman, and, they're a team that kind of thrives off of the star players that they bring in. So that they need to get that dynamic going as well as the collective team dynamic going. They needed this year to do that. And under normal circumstances, they may be a lot further along than they are now, but the pause obviously mitigated their opportunities to get together and learn each other on a personal level, let alone a football level. So I think that there's always a potential for individual brilliance from they have a medley of talented players on their roster, but it's going to take a team effort to beat a team like LAFC because LAFC, regardless of the prowess and the talent that it has, knows how to play as a team. And I don't think that individual efforts can sink this team over 90 minutes if you don't have that collective playing style also down pat. You can definitely go. Sorry about that.
No, I was just going to say, do you think that the right collection of LAFC mistakes, those sort of lapses that we saw in the Houston game, paired with, say, an outstanding performance from Chicharito, could do that job even if the Galaxy isn't firing on its cylinders as a team? I mean, we saw Zlatan LAFC that I don't think anyone could say that the Galaxy would have been even competitive in any of the games that they played against LAFC had it not been for Zlatan. Is there a scenario where there's that sort of like lapse play on LAFC's side and a strong performance from Chicharito that makes it irrelevant whether or not the Galaxy can be a cohesive team, which it doesn't seem like they are yet.
Speaking from the precedent that we have on LAFC, I think if there was a chance for them to come out and make a bunch of mental mistakes to either go along with or cause exemplary performance from any member of the Galaxy, Chicharito included, I think the chances of that happening are greater if they've, gained 3 points and had a good first showing against the Dynamo and are lulled into, as much as no player or no coach will ever say that they admit it or will ever admit it or say that they'd allow it beforehand. That sense of complacency it's part of human nature. Coming off of a game the way they had, where they're thankful to have the point they have, where they are looking up at Portland and Houston in the group in terms of standing right now, it's Portland, Houston, LAFC, Galaxy. So if it was a one-game group stage, LAFC would be hoping that they qualified for one of those wild card spots. I think that there was enough that went wrong in the first game that they're going to be looking at this second game, regardless of who it was against, as the game that they need to win because their finale is against Portland, who obviously had the best showing on the first night. So regardless of the name, forget the fact that it's a derby right now. I think that it's important for LAFC to come out and play a really, really really complete game against the Galaxy in this second game. But I don't think it's because it's the Galaxy that they need to. So I think they'll be super. What should I say? They'll be very aware of their circumstances and very aware that those mistakes can't happen. If that causes them to play tight, that presents its own issues. But I expect that they'll come out and start the game a bit better than they did against Portland or against Houston. And the fact that it's the Galaxy obviously makes it more interesting for the spectators and for the media. But from the player standpoint and, knowing how you play a group stage in a tournament, you just got to get these 3 points if you're trying to get into the knockout stage.
Josh, you brought up the depth really early on in our recording today and the subs that we saw for LAFC. Do you think, and the likes of whom we didn't even see, right? Like Jordan Harvey, Silva didn't enter the game. Bryce Duke didn't enter the game. Christian Torres, which, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention because it happened after our recording last time. that LAFC signed 3 academy players, which is a monumental moment for the club and for these players, obviously. And they brought one of them to Florida, and Christian Torres, who's an attacking player. Might he see time? Might Andy Nahar see time? And I mean, they have weapons that they didn't even use, and they still seem to outmuscle Houston in terms of the weapons that they brought on. In terms of that depth, do you see that being a factor against the Galaxy, Josh?
Yeah, no, that's why I called it a weapon early. I think it should be. And like you said, you referenced a bunch of guys that didn't even get to play. The fact that they have 5 substitutions, I think, is a difference. That a lot of teams, I'm sure, feel like they have depth, but LAFC certainly does. And there's no doubt that it can lack of proper conditioning and game time and everything that's happening in terms of being off. Depth is a critical factor in this tournament. There's no doubt about that. And so I would expect that to linger through as the games become, one and done. I don't know what that does to depth. I don't know if you leave in people longer or not. Maybe by that time they have their legs, but it's certainly a situation where I would expect that through the group stage, at least, we're going to see Bob Bradley have the ability to go to other players when he needs them and rely on them and expect them to make a difference. They certainly did in that last half hour against Houston. I don't think there's any doubt about that. To me, you really saw the depth of what LAFC can do, especially bringing up, changing the 2 outside backs. They were better when they took off Blackman and they took off who was the other one? I'm sorry, I'm escaping me. Who they bring off?
They brought off Chiqui Palacios as well, didn't they?
Right,
Ryan?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of their offense is created on the wings, right? We see it up and down. There's a lot of expected of those players coming from the back into the play, into the attack. There was a lot of empty crosses, just in the space. It felt like that they didn't know who to lean into, who to play, who was going to get the goal for LAFC, right? Who was going to be the difference maker. And so there was just a lot of playing with the ball, getting into the middle and hoping for something. But then they actually started to become more cohesive. And I think we saw the tired legs of Houston a real detriment to them. And some of the energy we saw come on for LAFC and their skill was a real factor. I don't see why that would change.
And
Again, I'm sorry, Ryan. I just wanted to reiterate that we were recording this on Wednesday, but Ryan, I was going to ask whether you had any updates on personnel availability and whether, like Diamande, the severity of this injury, or in general, whether you think that there'll be personnel changes using different subs for this game and players or places on the field where you might see a different starting lineup from what you observed from the 2 matches in Group F that we saw.
Well, the press is in on a conference call that's going to be tomorrow morning tomorrow morning West Coast time, 12:15 p.m. East Coast time. That I think Kenneth Vermeer, Edward Atuesta, and Bob Bradley will be on, and that'll be the time where I or whoever else asks Bob those questions about personnel. But just from what I saw, I think Palacios had some trouble defending the left back. He allowed a lot of successful runs down that side that turned into crosses that gave Houston dangerous opportunities. So I think he might be a player that potentially might be looked at to either get subbed off earlier or be a sub as opposed to starting. Tristan Blackman obviously didn't have the greatest performance on the outside, so outside back could be a place where maybe you see some shifting, but it's only one game and it's a very early game. And Bob Bradley isn't the type of guy to be super reactive on what happens in games. He derives his choices more from practices and conversations with his players. We all know that. So I don't think you can take a individual subpar performance and say that means that this player has a more likely chance of sitting than anybody else. I don't think that would be the driving factor behind Bob's decisions. He has a full roster. Relatively full roster. I think he should take advantage because you don't want to just let people continue to sit on the sidelines if they've earned playing time. But these are things that, unfortunately, at this tournament, the media is not privy to the way that we normally are in terms of their day in and day out practices. So I don't have as much insight in terms of the changes we might see. But I do want to say that, to Josh's point, they went into that first game, those first stages. Vela's not here. He's the talisman. We know how to play through him. But, Bob is always talking about the team being able to play through an identity that transcends any individual player. But when you take that from theory to practice, there's still got to be someone that you have confidence in. I think that all three starting forwards scoring for LAFC, and Rodriguez and Rossi and Bradley Wright Phillips, gives the team confidence in the players that are here now and available for this tournament. And I think that's only going to help the forward progression when, that confidence, maybe a split second faster, maybe a decision that you wouldn't have made in the first game, but because you were worried about giving the ball away, that you say, you know what, I trust him to get this done. I think that a great example of that was Rodriguez's goal. The pass sequence that I brought up earlier, Janela to Atuesta to Rodriguez, was very tight. And if it happens a split second slower, it gets broken up. I think we're going to see a lot more play like that than we did the first 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, and we've touched on the LAFC way, I think, throughout this recording. The quick counter pressing, the fast movement, quick decisions, moving the ball quickly, passing it using the right foot, always, these mechanical things that get, drummed into players day in and day out. The positional reliance on a system that they've always been playing basically since we've watched them. People have called it, the Bob Bradley system at some points, but he's always insisted of calling it the LAFC system, the LAFC way. And what I think is interesting at this stage, and even looking at some of the substitution options and this, whole having 5 substitutes thing, and kind of reflect on, Ryan, when we were recording earlier on this season, we often talked about right back. We often talked about these pieces within the puzzle that maybe could use some strengthening. They lost a player like Steve Beitashour, and they lost a player like Tyler Miller in the goalkeeping. But we have Andy Nahar, we have Kenneth Vermeer. And again, Nahar, though he hasn't played yet, this is a massive signing for LAFC if it comes off. We could see him play right back for Tristan, whether as a starter or as a substitute. Up front, we've all made it clear how much Carlos Vela affects this team, but having not just Bradley Wright Phillips, but Adio, but then even as Vince said, and there was this moment where Musovski turned with the ball and just ran at people. So he doesn't seem afraid as a center forward. He came over from the USL side, Reno, and it's interesting and cool and sort of fascinating to watch. We all love superstar players and players that make us blow our minds, but it's really interesting to watch how, within the system of MLS, where managers have to make maybe different decisions about personnel in a growing league with these salary restrictions, that they've gathered all these individuals, right, from across the world and from different places and different countries and different levels of their career, and they've managed to plug them in. And thus far, again, without bringing up the lack of sharpness and things which are justified, they're still playing the same football we've always seen. And there's something about that feels reliable and feels not just pleasing to the eye and entertaining, but and with the risks of how the outside backs go forward. It's if something's not working, they have the personnel to just throw it in. If Vermeer's not having a good game, they have Pablo Cincinnega. They have ways to sort of tinker and make things happen. And we talked about in the beginning at making this tournament, what was exciting about this tournament is we could see, Bob Bradley's sort of, masterpiece coming to life. We could see this team without Carlos Vela. We could see sort of this system. And, I think we all want them to have a strong outing in their next 2 games so that we can continue to see them play in this tournament, so we can just see all these different pieces move around and see how they operate and see if he can't get the best out of players as he has in LAFC's short history within this system. So, I confess to being more surprised and more. I was able to enjoy the game more despite the reluctance that I have for the tournament. And I really enjoyed talking with you guys today and having Vince on. Ryan, you're down in Florida. You're going to be there until probably the tournament's over, right?
Until both LA teams are eliminated or one of them wins. That's the good answer.
So we're gonna keep recording episodes. Josh, is there anything you want to add right before this massive Trafico, if you want to call it that, the LA Derby, if you're on that side of the fence, coming up on Saturday night? Is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we covered the ground pretty good. It's interesting because it feels like the Galaxy are going to play desperate. You know, a loss here effectively knocks them out, and I think we've seen from them that they rise to the occasion when they play LAFC. And I think Chicharito is going to want to leave his mark on this derby really early on, whether or not Carlos is there. So put nothing past the Galaxy in this contest. I mean, I saw enough issues, and we've seen LAFC give up goals. You know, it seems like the Galaxy struggle to find goals sometimes. Chicharito's goal was kind of like a perfect, brilliant little moment. That's something that he's done throughout his entire little career, just running behind the defense and put the ball in the net. There's no reason that he couldn't do that to LAFC's defenders. I will say that, you know, again and again, Eddie Segura has been tremendous. His reading the ball and just the way that he handles things. So that little interplay, we saw Segura against Zlatan. Now, sort of Segura dealing with a Chicharito who runs, creates different angles and slips in behind the defense, I think will be interesting as well. It's fun. Far and away, LAFC has been the most entertaining, I think. I haven't watched all of them, like I said, but it sure feels that way. And, you know, these matches have not disappointed. I don't think this one will either.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth shouting out Segura's partner in the center of defense, Dejan Jakovic, who, I mean, who's Walker Zimmerman at this point, right? He's not even playing in the tournament. He's with Nashville back wherever, but they haven't missed him. And they haven't, I mean, we all thought that was going to be such a big deal, but the way he's performed as a player who's been there since the beginning, who was like off on playing for the Las Vegas Lights for a time, I mean, he's been incredible. The center back pairing has been outstanding thus far. We'll see how it poses against the challenge of the Galaxy. Ryan, do you have any last things to add before we sign off for the good people?
No, I think we've said it all. You know, continue to look for big things from Bradley Wright Phillips there in the center. I think that, you know, LAFC can, this Sans Vela offense can really, you know, reach levels close to what it was in 2019 in terms of that danger and that unpredictability. If they have two capable wings, which they do in Rossi and Rodriguez, and that true, you know, number 10 style, just what's the phrase that I use? Monkey with a rocket launcher, Dwyer, just crashing into the middle and making things crazy. You saw a little bit of that with that beautiful finish that he put for his first. If you just keep the crosses swinging in and he stays in those good positions that, you know, he's been getting in his whole 100+ goal career for the Red Bulls, then I think that LAFC's offense could really, even without Bell at this tournament, still be something that wows its audiences. You know, TV, not crowd, but people are watching. Yep.
And that one is going to be a 7:30 kickoff West Coast time. It's close to
10:30 here on the East. It's great.
Yeah, 10:30 on the East on Saturday night, this coming Saturday, which I believe is the 18th of July. Second game in Group F for both teams. LAFC and the Galaxy playing their first ever LA derby outside of California. It's gonna be entertaining for sure. And LAFC never seems to fail to entertain since this team's begun. We hope we provided some entertainment or at least information. Vince LaRosa was on earlier. His Instagram, That's How You Soccer, has just been hosting some great stuff with his little victories, as he calls it, and the writing you came to love from him. He's sort of using that as a platform to talk about this tournament, and he knows so much about this league in general. It's worth checking out. Josh Gross, thank you for always putting this together. StreamYard's kind of a great platform. You can just pop on. They don't even sponsor the pod. They're just great. It's been awesome. Ryan Wallerson is down in Florida. He's staying safe. He's staying good. And hire Vince. Watch MLS Is Back. wear a mask, be safe. We love and miss you guys. I wish I was in the press box with my boys and at the sides of training, but miss you guys. Much love. And next stop, LA Derby.
Peace, y'all.